So on April 26, 2023, DJI released firmware version 01.03.10.30 for the Osmo Action 3. In this video, I'm going to do a brief run through of what that firmware update included and what it did not include that I wished it had included, but I'm hoping DJI will include that at a later date because it's features that I've been waiting on for a while and chances are some of you have as well. So the first thing this firmware update included was enhanced image quality in certain resolutions and frame rates. Now, enhanced image quality has already been available as an option from a previous firmware update, but this added it in more frame rates and modes. So if you have a favorite resolution and frame rate that did not include the enhanced image quality previously, chances are it might include that now. I toggled through a bunch of the modes that I typically use, and that was available there. I don't really use an enhanced image quality much or at all. In my opinion, DJI sharpens the footage too much. I don't like footage that's over sharp because I think it actually looks bad in a lot of situations, especially if I'm hiking in the woods. When it brings out too many details in those branches and leaves on the trees, I personally don't like how it looks. I wish DJI had an option to change the sharpness on the Action 3. Maybe they'll add that at a later time, but I would love to be able to fine tune it. I like to shoot with sharpness low. But if you like to use the enhanced image quality, it is available in more places now. Decent-alike is the one that I still use most of the time because I like to grade and color grade the footage later on. The second feature of this firmware update is improved image quality when using the Action 3 as a webcam or live streaming. That was a nice improvement to see. If you use the Action 3 as a webcam or for live streaming, chances are the footage is going to look better in both of those scenarios. Another feature of this firmware update was optimized UI display for certain functions. Now what I take that as is there were some improvements with the user interface and how it shows options when you're doing certain things. I didn't really see anything different in the menus, but it could also be optimization could mean that the touch sensitivity has been adjusted a little. Maybe some of those finer details were moved around. Maybe the font size was changed. Something like that is probably what I take that to mean. And finally, the firmware update says it fixed some minor bugs. So that's not really specific. I don't know what that means, but if you had a bug with your Action 3, then update the firmware and see if that bug went away. If it did, then great. This firmware update probably included a fix for the bug you were having. Two things I was disappointed to not see in this firmware update, especially since we had been waiting since December of 2022 for another firmware update. So DJI took 4 months for this firmware update. It didn't include the gyro data, which is really unfortunate because there are plenty of scenarios where you don't want to have Rocksteady turned on. If you like to use ND filters with your camera to get that cinematic motion blur, that would be one of the scenarios where you don't want Rocksteady on. Unfortunately, you can't take that footage and stabilize it later with other software if you don't have the gyro data available. You can do a little bit of stabilizing with it, but the footage is going to have this weird wobble this way, that way, and it's going to kind of look like waves in your footage. It looks really bad. So it's really unfortunate that gyro data is not there because that limits a lot of the potential of this camera. The other feature that I know a lot of you were looking for is the audio gain feature where you can adjust the audio gain. Unfortunately, that was not part of this firmware update either. But maybe DJI is preparing that and still working on it for a future update. We'll see. But there you go, that's a recap of what the April 2023 firmware update included.